Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Rich, the host of Sports Talk with RKJ, and we're back for week 3 of our college football rankings reaction show. And we'll start at the top with LSU, who beat Ole Miss last week. High-scoring game. Defense struggled. As I listened to Philip Feinbaum yesterday, he said that this could be their last week at number 1 because if Penn State beats Ohio State, he thinks they're going to be number 1 in the poll. So you look at LSU, they got Arkansas this week at home and then Texas A&M at home this week. And I'll say it, if they win out, I think it doesn't matter if they win the SEC title game. I think if they win out, they are going to go to the college football playoff regardless. You look at Ohio State, huge game this week as they play Penn State, a huge game in Columbus this week. They have 2 huge games as they host Penn State in Columbus, and then they go to they go to Michigan. So what's your reaction on the top 2?
Yeah, right there. You know, they've been the 2 best teams in the country, and yeah, LSU's defense is going to be their kryptonite. They gave up 212 yards to the John Rice Plumlee last week. They Ole Miss quarterback, so that I would not be surprised to see Ohio State jump LSU. But it depends kind of how on Ohio State plays because their defense plays lights out and everything. I definitely put Ohio State over LSU because that would also be Ohio State's 4th win against the top 25 team. I know LSU's beat 4 top 10 teams when they play, but Ohio State has also won 4 top 25 games.
Oh, absolutely. And we look at the rest of we'll go over to the top of 6. You got Clemson at number 3. They're probably going to stay at number 3, looking at their schedule and get to the college football playoff. You look at Georgia number 4, big game this week at Texas A&M. Then they go to Georgia Tech, and they're going to have the huge SEC championship game, which will probably determine their college football playoff fate. And you look at Bama, they're the interesting team. Play Auburn in that last game. They're going to be sitting there on that last Saturday, just like they were 2 years ago. But the difference is they won't have Tua Tagovailoa, so they'll be sitting there looking at what happens with them. And then you got the Pac-12, Jace Garcia's favorite conference, and if he's listening, we'll give him a big shout out. He's the host of Hard Hitting College Football and John about the G-Men. So I mean, he's a Big 12 guy. And you got Oregon at number 6, Utah at number 7. So very, very interesting right there between those 3 teams.
Yeah, it is, and it is. And with Bama, I said this on our on the other show, is that Alabama now with Mac Jones, your starting quarterback, they go to Jordan-Hare next week and knock off Auburn with a backup quarterback. Oregon lost to Auburn in neutral site with their starting quarterback, and I know it's week 1, and if Oregon played Auburn again in Arlington, I think Oregon pretty much controlled that game. They led or were tied for the first 59 minutes and 51 seconds of that ball game. So you could come down to that as well. But yeah, right there, Alabama, and we've seen in the past, 2 years ago, Alabama didn't win their conference championship, but they still got in, and it would be the first year without them. So Alabama still, they don't control their own destiny, but I still feel at the moment they're probably in good shape. But it get kind of interesting, but then it does get interesting. I'd rather see an Oregon or Utah get in over Alabama to see somebody new. But
and Alabama doesn't have Tua either.
Yeah, they don't. But, let's see what happens when they go to Jordan-Hare. We're going to find out a lot, I think, what the committee thinks about Alabama when they go to Jordan-Hare next week and play Auburn on the road. And then one more thing for Utah is USC has jumped into the top 25 now. So
Great point. They're number 24 now. Great point there.
Yeah, so their loss now does not look as bad. And Zach Moss, our starting running back, was also hurt that game. So that doesn't look as bad as a loss, even though really, so I know if they do knock off Oregon and everything goes Utah's way, they still wouldn't, Alabama's loss is still a little bit better core because they lost to LSU. But Utah there now USC's not a bad loss at the moment.
And I think what the committee was doing is that, as Kirk Herbstreit said yesterday, number 5 is kind of a placeholder for Alabama because they want to see what they do against Auburn, and it's going to be really interesting to see if they beat Auburn. Will they take Alabama? Or will they take the Pac-12 champion? That's going to be the big question. That's going to be the really big question. Do they take the Pac-12 champion or do they take Alabama? That's going to be the question that a lot of us will have to answer. That's going to be the really interesting question there. So we'll go to the final 3 teams in the top 10. And you got Penn State, who's got a humongous game in Columbus this weekend. If they win this, they're definitely back in the college football playoff conversation. If they win this game, because they'll win the Big Ten East because they host Rutgers next week. So, and then you got Oklahoma, who hosts TCU and then goes to Oklahoma State. So that's gonna be really interesting as well. And you got Minnesota. Even though they lost to Iowa last week, they're still ranked number 10. They play Northwestern. They should win this week, and then they have the humongous game in 2 weeks for Paul Bunyan's Axe at home against Wisconsin. Has there ever been a Minnesota-Wisconsin game that'll mean so much? I think the division championship will be on the line. Minnesota's college football playoff hopes will be on the line, so a ton will be on the line in that game as Minnesota faces Wisconsin. And I'll ask you a question. Do you think Minnesota should be ahead of Oklahoma? With 2 one-loss teams, would you put Minnesota ahead of Oklahoma?
It's a toss-up. And I guess, I think Oklahoma's sitting at 9 because they did just beat Baylor on the road. Minnesota just lost to a good Iowa team on the road. So, and we've kind of seen that the committee this year really has not respected the Big 12 really, because Oklahoma's still sitting there at 9 and Baylor was 13. They only moved back 1 spot because I think the committee finally respected Baylor's team, and we kind of see Iowa State back there at like 23rd. We've kind of seen it very interchangeable with it. Kansas State's entered and got knocked out. Texas last week, and now Iowa State's back in it. I don't mind it. I think if you put both those teams on the field, I just think Oklahoma's a little bit better. I would take Minnesota defense, of course, but if we see both those teams on the field and they play, I think Oklahoma's a little bit better than Minnesota. I think their offense would just be too much. So I don't mind Oklahoma. It's a very tough choice, but I think with Oklahoma coming off the win, Minnesota just losing, I think, it's a, I don't mind it. I think Oklahoma should be 9 right now. And I know I predicted Minnesota win last week. I was kind of hoping they would get into the top 6 and kind of create a mess, but they went down. But next week against Wisconsin, I still think, though, Minnesota holds has control of their destiny, though, because if they win the Big Ten, I think they get it. They definitely, I think, get in. In Oklahoma, I think even if they win the Big 12 with that 1 loss, they sitting there, they don't really control their own destiny at this point.
So you think, how can Oklahoma find a way to get into the college football playoff? What has to happen?
Well, I would think you need Alabama to lose.
So you think if they win the Big 12 and Alabama's sitting there, even without Tua, Alabama's gonna get it over them? That should be obvious. I think they are.
I would. Yeah, at this moment, I think Alabama. I mean, the committee thinks Alabama's, which is probably a better team at the moment than Oklahoma. So yeah, I think the Alabama would definitely put Alabama in over Oklahoma. Because of I think defensive wise, even though Alabama's defense not great, but I think, as we've seen over the past few years.
And the losses, too. Oklahoma lost to Kansas State. Alabama lost to LSU.
Yeah, and that would be another big factor. Even though Oklahoma probably would, at the moment, has the best win over Baylor. But Alabama could change that. They beat Auburn, but they lose. And then, also, I think they would need Oregon or Utah to be upset. One of the two where they don't meet each other in the Pac-12 championship game. And then maybe even whoever, if it's, let's just say Utah maybe loses to Colorado next week and it's Oregon, I think it would be USC at the moment. Yeah, I think it'd be USC at the moment. And then let's just say Oregon lose to USC. Then I think Oklahoma would probably get in if everything else kind of holds its own. If Ohio State wins, I think then it would be like Ohio State, LSU. Yeah, Ohio State, LSU, Clemson. Yeah, that was the third time missing. And then Oklahoma. I think they just need total chaos to get in.
Yeah, and assuming Penn State, if they win the Big Ten, they're in. That's automatic.
Yeah, I think if Penn State or Minnesota win the Big Ten, I think they're both in. I'd be shocked because Penn State avenges that loss to Minnesota if Minnesota does beat Wisconsin. And then Penn State, they get a great win against if Minnesota gets in, Big Ten championship game. They run table. They knock Ohio State. That'd be, I think, the best win of the year for any team. And then Penn State avenging the loss, going to Ohio State winning. I think both of them would totally be in.
So say Ohio State loses to Penn State this week. They don't make the Big Ten championship game. Or they're go undefeated and lose to Minnesota in the Big Ten championship game. Do they get into the playoff?
I think if they lose this week, I think it depends on what happens with Penn State and Minnesota. If it would be Minnesota, I think they should get in. Because they've been the most complete team. I think it depends on how they lose a game. If they kind of get blown out, which I don't think. I think if they lose a really tight competitive game, they should get in over Alabama. That's what I think they should replace Alabama's spot.
So, as we do every week, we'll do what we think the top 10 rankings will be next week. And I think Paul Feinbaum may end up being right. If Ohio State beats Penn State pretty convincingly, it might end up being Ohio State 1, LSU 2, Clemson 3, obviously Georgia 4, Alabama 5, Oregon 6, Utah 7. I'm going to go Oklahoma 8 because Penn State will lose. And then you got Minnesota 9, and then it doesn't really matter who's 10, but I'll just put Florida at 10. So number 1 will actually be interesting to see who's number 1 going into next Tuesday night's rankings, if it's going to be Ohio State or LSU. And I think that's all going to depend on how much Ohio State beats Penn State this week.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And I actually have the same poll as you. I think Ohio State, I think they do beat Penn State. I think they move to 1 because they're just, I think, the most complete team in the country, just defensive-wise. We've seen LSU, their rush defense is not great. Their defense overall is not great. And I think if you want to take that best team in the country, it would be Ohio State, especially if they shut down this Penn State offense and their defense looks as elite as we've seen it all season. And then I'm right with you the rest of the way. I'd have LSU too. They're actually the biggest favorite ever in the SEC game at 44 points ever. Arkansas is probably the worst SEC team I've ever seen of my time watching college football. I got Clemson 3, Georgia 4, Bama 5, 6 Oregon, 7 Utah, 8 Oklahoma, 9 Minnesota, 10 Florida.
Gotcha. So that's going to wrap it up this week for our college football reaction ranking show. We'll be back. We'll see if we're back next week, the week of Thanksgiving, but we'll definitely be back before the conference championship week doing another show. And obviously we'll do our wrap-up show the Monday after the conference rankings. So, and we just see our man Jace Garcia just joined us right when the show is going to end. Jace Garcia joins us. He's going to be glued to the TV Saturday night as he'll be probably watching Oregon and Utah play. So we'll see what ends up happening there. And we know he'll want the Pac-12 champion in that college football playoff over Alabama.
I'd rather see one of those two get in over Alabama. I respect Nick Saban and all that, but I want to see somebody new get a chance.
Yeah. So for Justin D'Onofrio, I'm Steve Risser. I'll be back a little bit later on, about 15-30 minutes, doing my NFL preview. So we thank Judge Jace Garcia for joining us on Facebook Live, and we hope you can join me for my Week 12 preview of the NFL.